Donald Trump thought the Epstein story had faded into the background, that if he played it off as though it had disappeared, and if Pam Bondi ignored the rule of law, everyone would just forget. He probably thought distracting us with other issues, like Greenland, would make it all go away. But that's far from the case today, and a lot of it has to do with what Bill Clinton, of all people, just did. We're going to break it all down, but before we dive in, please take a moment to like this video, and if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because it helps support our work. Now it's not just Bill Clinton causing an Epstein bombshell for Trump today. A worker at a Ford plant, along with Republicans in Congress, are also part of this story. Let's start with the latest updates from those Republicans, as reported by Ari Melber.
2026 has started with a lot of controversy for Donald Trump's presidency. He is facing accusations of breaking the law abroad and at home, and a big legal inquiry that has taken up most of our broadcast tonight with that terrible shooting in Minneapolis. Now, I want to turn to lawmakers dialing up pressure on DOJ under Trump for breaking a different law, which is another big story that he might prefer to go away. The DOJ is breaking the Epstein law that Trump signed, the Epstein Transparency Act. They have released a tiny portion of files when they faced the original deadline, which landed in December, exactly 1 month after the humiliating loss that Trump faced when his own party rebuffed him and required him to stop hiding documents and covering up for Epstein for whatever reasons Trump and his policies had done. And now we see lawmakers in both parties saying that it is clear that Trump DOJ is breaking the law, and they're threatening criminal sanctions over that.
Typically, like with contempt, you might refer that to the DOJ, and then the DOJ never prosecutes itself. And then the problem goes away at the end of the Congress because it's contempt because they're not in compliance with the congressional subpoena, which expires at the end of Congress. This law does not expire at the end of Congress. And so they've got a real problem. The contempt that the Congress refers, they could be in jeopardy of that even after this Congress expires.
Massey is speaking in sort of the legal process there, but the bottom line about the real problem he's mentioning is a reference to that soon enough, and mind you, he's a Republican, he's saying they could be out of office and an ensuing administration could actually hold them in contempt and people could get in trouble. Chuck Schumer says Congress wants that list of government officials that's required and asks what they're hiding. There's also the admission from the DOJ that there's 2 million Epstein documents still under review, with 12,000 documents that reach up to over 100,000 pages released. That would actually mean they've only done 1% of the files that they say exist. Lawmakers turning to external pressure. A bipartisan group wants an audit of this process. Democratic senators also trying to put the heat specifically on Trump's chief of staff, seeking more information because she claimed in a recent interview that she's looked over these files that Trump has named but isn't doing anything awful. Trump's DOJ has said this review could take weeks more. This is after they've had 6 weeks, give or take, and claimed they'd done a review and claimed they had 200 lawyers working on this. Any normal law firm dealing with this type of investigation and request would have completed it by now. So what are they hiding?
If this were a private law firm with 5% of the resources of the DOJ, this would have been done by the devil.
2026 has already brought a wave of controversy for Donald Trump's presidency. He's now facing serious accusations of breaking the law both abroad and at home, including a major legal inquiry that has taken center stage in tonight's broadcast, alongside the devastating shooting in Minneapolis. Now, let's turn our attention to the growing pressure on the DOJ under Trump for breaking yet another law, something Trump would probably prefer to stay out of the spotlight. The DOJ is violating the Epstein law that Trump himself signed, the Epstein Transparency Act. They've only released a small fraction of the documents they were supposed to provide by the original deadline in December, 1 month after Trump suffered a major setback when his own party forced him to stop hiding documents and covering up Epstein's actions for whatever reasons Trump and his policies had. Now, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle are making it clear that Trump's DOJ is breaking the law and they're threatening criminal sanctions if this continues. Normally, when Congress refers an issue of contempt, it gets sent to the DOJ. However, the DOJ rarely prosecutes itself, and by the end of the congressional term, the issue often fades as those subpoenas expire. But this law doesn't have that kind of expiration, so Trump's DOJ is facing a serious problem. Even after this Congress expires, they could still be held in contempt. Representative Massey, speaking from a legal perspective, explained that the real problem here is that, even as a Republican, he believes a future administration could hold Trump's team in contempt, and those involved could face serious consequences. Chuck Schumer, in a separate statement, emphasized that Congress is demanding the release of the list of government officials tied to this case. He asked, "What are they hiding?" There's also the troubling admission from the DOJ that there are still 2 million Epstein-related documents under review, with only 12,000 of them, amounting to over 100,000 pages, released so far. That means, by their own admission, they've only reviewed 1% of the files. This has lawmakers calling for external pressure, and a bipartisan group is now demanding an audit of the process. Democratic senators are specifically targeting Trump's chief of staff, asking for more information. She recently claimed in an interview that she reviewed the files containing Trump's name, but insists nothing incriminating is present. Meanwhile, the DOJ claims the review will take more weeks, despite already having 6 weeks and 200 lawyers working on it. Any normal law firm, with just a fraction of the resources the DOJ has, would have finished this review by now. So, what are they hiding? Donald Trump is absolutely furious after being labeled a pedophile protector. In an outburst, he even flipped someone off in retaliation. But the bigger question is, does he honestly think that this will just blow over? That people will simply forget about the serious accusations being thrown at him? It seems like he believes he can ignore the damage done and move on. But the reality is far from that. This kind of controversy isn't something that just fades away, especially when it's so deeply tied to his reputation and actions.
Unanimously by the committee in a bipartisan manner, we will move next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress.
Yeah,
So with that, be happy to answer any questions real quick.
Mr. Chairman,
Anybody on the committee?
will you roll out bringing Donald Trump in for an interview
Well,
in this investigation?
President Trump has answered thousands of questions about Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, I would say today, you all ask him questions every day. He answers questions every day
yes or no?
about Epstein.
Will you rule out?
Well, you can't bring in a current president of the United States, and you all know that. So, but President Trump has answered thousands of questions about Epstein. I bet today, at some point, some of you all will ask President Trump questions about Epstein. He answers those questions. To my knowledge, former President Clinton has never answered questions about Epstein, and we just had questions because, again, I think anyone would admit they spent a lot of time together while Bill Clinton was president and post-presidency.
The committee has unanimously decided, in a bipartisan manner, to move forward next week in the House Oversight Committee markup to hold former President Clinton in contempt of Congress. Now, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Mr. Chairman, is anyone on the committee planning to bring Donald Trump in for an interview? Well, in this investigation, both President Clinton and President Trump have answered countless questions about Jeffrey Epstein. In fact, I would argue that on a daily basis, you all ask him questions about Epstein, and he answers them. Of course, you can't bring in a sitting president, and you all know that. But President Trump has already answered thousands of questions about Epstein, and I'm certain that, at some point today, some of you will ask him more questions about it, and he will respond. To my knowledge, former President Clinton has never answered questions regarding Epstein. We've had a number of questions for him, especially considering the significant time he spent with Epstein, both during his presidency and after.
All right, today, amid just the blitz of headlines on what has been a gigantic news day following a gigantic news week, you might not have noticed the news today. You might not have seen the headline today that today a federal court blocked the Trump administration from cutting energy funding just for blue states. This is billions of dollars Congress appropriated for clean energy projects of various kinds all over the country. Trump administration decided, and they admitted this, they decided that just in blue states, just in states that didn't vote for Trump, they would cut all of that funding. They'd leave the funding in place in states that voted for Trump. They would cut it in states that didn't vote for Trump. A federal court today ruled that that is illegal and stopped the Trump administration from doing that. That ruling today came after another federal court today stopped Trump from shutting down a big offshore wind farm in Rhode Island and Connecticut. Trump's shutdown of that project, according to the courts today, was also illegal, and so yet another federal court blocked Trump on that as well, so that work on the wind farm will be able to go ahead. Both of those rulings today follow last night yet another federal court blocking Trump, this time from cutting funding to the American Academy of Pediatrics. This is a doctors group, a pediatricians group that criticized the flock of ducks level insane quackery at Trump's Department of Health and Human Services under RFK Jr. Trump responded by canceling federal grants for the American Academy of Pediatrics. A judge has now ruled that that was illegal retaliation, and so Trump is blocked from doing that. That funding has to be reinstated. That ruling comes after another federal judge just blocked Trump from cutting off federal election funds to states in retaliation for them not changing their election rules in ways that Trump wants. The judge said, quote, "The Constitution assigns no authority to the president over federal election administration." And so Trump got blocked on that one, too. Shall I keep going? I could keep going. Another federal court just blocked Trump from freezing billions of dollars for childcare and social services for kids, again, in Democratic-run states, as some kind of punishment against those states for electing Democrats, punishing them for that by cutting off the Temporary Assistance to Needy Families program. Because, what would Jesus do? Trump was also just blocked from doing that by yet another federal court. It's almost like he is losing all the time and everywhere now. There may still be people in America who are shocked that Trump keeps breaking the law over and over again, blatantly and insistently. The courts no longer appear to be shocked by that. And the courts now are just telling him no, very bluntly, every single day and often multiple times a day. And it's not even just the courts. As I know you are aware, last week in one 48-hour stretch, we had a Senate vote for a war powers resolution to block Trump from any further military adventurism in Venezuela. 5 Republican senators crossed over to side with Democrats to pass that war powers resolution. It was enough to advance that. It's going to get another vote in the Senate this week. That came right on the heels of 17 Republicans in the House breaking ranks with Trump and siding with Democrats on the Affordable Care Act to try to at least temporarily undo the disastrous decision Trump and Republicans made in their so-called Big Beautiful Bill.
Today, amid a flood of major headlines, you might have missed a crucial one. A federal court has blocked the Trump administration's attempt to cut energy funding specifically for blue states. These are billions of dollars Congress had allocated for clean energy projects nationwide. The Trump administration admitted they intentionally decided to cut this funding in states that didn't vote for him, while keeping it in states that did. The court ruled this action illegal and has now stopped the administration from moving forward with it. But that's not the only loss for Trump today. Another federal court blocked his attempt to shut down a major offshore wind farm project in Rhode Island and Connecticut. The court ruled his decision to halt the project was illegal, allowing the work to continue. These rulings follow a separate one last night, where a judge blocked Trump from cutting funding to the American Academy of Pediatrics, a group that had criticized his Department of Health and Human Services under RFK Jr. The judge ruled that cutting their funding was illegal retaliation, so the funding must be reinstated. And it doesn't stop there. Another federal judge blocked Trump from withholding federal election funds from states that didn't change their election rules to his liking. The judge made it clear the Constitution assigns no authority to the president over federal election administration, effectively blocking Trump's move. Should I keep going? Because I could. A federal court has just blocked Trump from freezing billions of dollars in childcare and social services funding in Democratic-run states, claiming it was a punishment for those states electing Democrats. Trump was again blocked from cutting off the Temporary Assistance for Needy Families program. It's becoming a pattern. Trump losing in court over and over again. At this point, there may still be some people shocked by Trump's constant legal violations, but the courts are no longer surprised. They're now delivering swift, blunt rulings against him, sometimes multiple times a day. And it's not just the courts. Just last week, in a 48-hour period, the Senate passed a war powers resolution to block Trump from any further military actions in Venezuela. 5 Republican senators crossed the aisle to vote with Democrats on that issue. It's set to get another vote this week. That's on top of 17 Republicans in the House who broke ranks with Trump and sided with Democrats to temporarily undo the disastrous effects of Trump's so-called Big Beautiful Bill on the Affordable Care Act. Trump just can't seem to stop losing.